Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of GeoPod. I'm your host, Dylan Woods. The topic of today is going to be the ongoing hostilities within the Middle East. It's been quite a while since I've done an update on the ongoing Iranian conflict, so I chose to devote the content of this video to that specific subject. There's a lot to discuss. A lot of things have occurred over the course of the past week and a half, and I'm just here to give you my perspective, my opinions and my comments on them. So the Combined Strike Force has been busy with the ongoing aerial campaign, striking missile launch sites, missile storage depots, command and control structures, Iran's internal security apparatus, as well as Iran's naval ports, islands, and overall maritime capabilities. Now, as of this particular moment in time, Iran has answered each and every round of airstrikes with retaliatory strikes, although it has to be noted that the volume of these retaliatory strikes have decreased significantly. However, over the course of the past few weeks, the number has been more or less stale. It hasn't increased much, it hasn't decreased much, which tells you that either the Combined Strike Forces' emphasis on striking missile launch sites has somewhat decreased, or Iran has found ways to maximize its current remaining stockpile and make the most use of it. What we have seen, this is particularly true pertaining to the Gulf states, is that Iran has relied significantly more on drone strikes as opposed to ballistic missile strikes. Whereas when it comes down to targeting Israel, Iran has relied more on ballistic missiles, and particularly missiles carrying cluster munitions which can disperse over a specific area, making aerial interception significantly more challenging. Now, the reason why this is, first and foremost, is because the Gulf states are in a much closer proximity to Iran than Israel is. But secondly, over the course of the 12-day war of last year that Israel waged against Iran, Israel had an interception rate pertaining to drones of 99.99%, meaning it pretty much intercepted every drone that was launched towards them, either from Iran or from Yemen, launched by the Houthi organization. Iran has had much more success firing cluster munitions towards Israel, which seems to be quite a challenge for Israel's aerial defensive systems. Why? Because, as I've said before, cluster munitions disperse warheads, numerous warheads over a specific area, making it significantly more challenging for single projectiles to intercept them. Now, once again, did it allow Iran to degrade Israel's offensive and defensive capabilities to an extent that it would have a direct effect on their current aerial campaigns against the Ayatollah regime? No, absolutely not. Mostly civilian infrastructure gets targeted. The same is true for the Gulf states, I might add, although energy infrastructure has been struck in those areas as well. So what it tells us, and I've said this right at the beginning of this conflict, and that's Iran lacks clinical precision. So whenever I told previously on this channel that Iran isn't necessarily quite adept at warfare, well, this is one of the main reasons. Yes, cluster munitions is great for effect, right? Posting on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, a rain of bombs falling on Israel, falling on your enemy. It's great for rhetoric, right? It's great for the ongoing narrative that you're still in this fight. But in terms of tactical and operational and strategic objectives, it means very, very little if the offensive and defensive capabilities of your adversary are not diminished. So it's mostly for show as of this particular moment in time, to show the international community who perhaps aren't as well versed in warfare that, hey, we're not going anywhere, this campaign is doomed to fail, we will remain, we will survive. What we have seen, according to multiple sources, is that Iran's current missile launches, 470 missile launches Iran had at its disposal prior to this war, about 330 to 350 of those missile launches and missile launch sites are now rendered inoperable, whether by direct destruction or because they are buried under a pile of rubble as an indirect result of the Combined Force strike campaign. So it means that the vast majority of Iran's launch sites and launch capabilities are currently degraded. They haven't been degraded to the fullest extent. We'll delve into that a little bit deeper later on. And that brings me to my next point, which is the Israelis came out recently and said that they've struck approximately 3,000 targets in Iran as of this particular moment in time, where 600 of those strikes were targeted at Iran's missile capabilities. Well, in my opinion, that stands as a bit of a critique, really, because what it shows you is that only less than 1/5 of your strikes were aimed at the direct offensive capabilities of your adversary, the same offensive capabilities your adversary currently utilizes to strike your citizens, your civilians, and your security and civilian infrastructure. So what it tells you is that prior to the launch of this campaign, the Combined Strike Force had numerous strategic objectives, operational or strategic objectives that they wanted to accomplish. And I believe that they either had too many of these objectives that they want to go after at the same time, or perhaps they failed to properly prioritize each and every one of those objectives. For example, like I've said multiple times before on this channel, targeting Iran's internal security apparatus is all well and good, but if you don't have a unified opposition front or an indigenous force on the ground that can utilize the vacuum left behind by a destabilized regime, it's pretty much useless. It's a waste of ammunition, right? At the same time, taking away Iran's command and control structure on the short term is still something you might go after. However, that by itself will not allow the regime to fall in on itself. What you have to understand about the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is that they adhere to a decentralized command structure, meaning they're divided between provincial command centers which can operate independently, meaning that even if the head of the snake is cut off, all these provincial units can still pose a threat to any opposing adversarial force, right? So yes, diminishing Iran's command and control structure is good to allow you to achieve swift tactical and operational objectives. However, for the big strategic objectives, which is altering the regime or allowing the regime to fall in on itself, you'll need a little bit more. As do you if you truly want to defang the snake to the fullest extent possible. For example, what we're seeing now is we're seeing more emphasis being placed on striking maritime and naval targets, particularly maritime and naval infrastructure and capabilities that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps utilizes to block the Strait of Hormuz and any attack any merchant vessels crossing through them. So obviously, that's a huge priority to the Great, and it should have been one of the main priorities of the Combined Strike Force at the start of this war, right? Degrade the offensive and defensive capabilities of your adversaries first, take away their limbs, take away their fingers, their toes. Then, once they're harmless, once they're without arms, once they're without means to effectively wage war, when their mind, their spirit is battered, then you go after the mainframe, then you go after this. But doing all of it at the same time is going to be significantly more costly, and it's going to take a lot longer to accomplish all those strategic objectives on the go. And that's one of my main points of critiques regarding the Combined Strike Force and their operational and strategic objectives, and how they went about it up until this point, right? In my perspective, in my view, what I believe Trump, and perhaps even entire Central Command with him, believed was if they would pick away at Iran from every angle, pick away at the regime, pick away at the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, pick away on every element of Iran's military and security infrastructure, that would spark another burst of protests, which will draw the opposition factions or indigenous forces, indigenous militias into a ground offensive, or which eventually would prompt the Ayatollah regime to surrender, or at the very least return to the negotiating table. However, as we've seen up until this point, that's not the case. The Iranian regime won't fall that easily, right? They've been, like I said before on this channel, they've been preparing for war for a very long time. And they, in their eyes, are currently faced with an existential threat, meaning they will struggle until there's nothing left to struggle about. Meaning, you want to have a very long breath if toppling the regime in the way you're currently going about it is your end goal and thereby your exit strategy. Now, what I would have liked to see more is, let's say, 3,000 of the IDF strikes on Iran. Let's say I would have loved to see 2,500 of these strikes being targeted at their direct capabilities to launch missiles and projectiles at Israel, to their ability to utilize unmanned surface vehicles, drones, anti-ship cruise missiles, maritime capabilities to block the Strait of Hormuz. I would have loved to see those capabilities degraded first before extensively targeting command and control structures and the internal security apparatus of Iran, and even removing key political figures, right? Yes, removing key political figures is a great shock tactic. But as I've said before, if you're facing an adversary who adheres to a decentralized command structure, these commanders, these political figures, these leaders, they will just get replaced, right? It doesn't defang the snake to the extent that you want it to. And that is one of my main points of critique here. Now, recently, the Combined Strike Force has amplified, has boosted up their campaign targeting Iran's maritime and naval capabilities, which is obviously of great importance given the fact that the Strait of Hormuz is currently practically closed, which is also, on a side note, is quite interesting given the fact that the last attack the IRGC launched against the merchant vessel was on the 11th of March, so more than 2 weeks ago as of this particular moment in time. And it shows you that even with gasoline and energy prices surging across the globe, it shows you that economic parameters, influxes and defluxes, are not defined by reality. They're not defined by catastrophic events necessarily. They're defined by perceptions of risk and threat, right? Perception is everything. And as of right now, as I've recently said on this channel, and at the beginning of this clip, what Iran is doing is boosting the narrative, pushing forward the narrative with any means they have at their disposal, that they're still in this fight, that they still have the ability to enforce a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, and thereby impacting global economy. It's all about perception, the perception of risk, the perception of threat. And in the absence of a joint task force that takes it upon itself to secure commercial ship lanes within the Strait of Hormuz, that narrative can hold up for a significant amount of time, as we're currently seeing. Now, I will later on this week, I will do another strategy breakdown where I will discuss a little bit more in depth why a premature exit for the United States pertaining to this war is a very, very, very bad idea. So I won't necessarily go into that much of it right now. Let's save that for the strategy breakdown, which will occur later on this week. But it's, like I said, it shows you that narrative and controlling the information space with footage, no matter how symbolic it may be, can be a very determining factor in modern warfare. And Iran is adhering to that strategy very keenly. Now, at the same time, Israel is waging a campaign against Hezbollah, currently in the south of Lebanon, utilizing, as of this particular moment in time, over 9 brigades. So they're preparing for an extensive ground operation within Lebanon. Hezbollah has been quite active over the course of the past few weeks. Their volleys and barrages that they've launched at Israel, consisting of both missiles, drones, and rockets, have been some of the largest and heaviest since the latest round of fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in fall 2024. So what it tells you is that obviously every UN resolution, every agreement that was in place between the Lebanese government, Hezbollah, and Israel was more or less symbolic. Hezbollah is still very much capable of waging war against its adversaries, of destabilizing the region and controlling vast amounts of Lebanese territory, to put it quite bluntly. And the Lebanese armed forces clearly have no capacity whatsoever to limit the scope of the threat that is Hezbollah in its current shape and form. So Israel has taken upon itself to mitigate the threat once and for all. Now, what does this tell us? What this tells us is, first and foremost, Israel is in no way, shape, or form wary of war, right? They're still in the fight in the Iranian theater, and they're just opening another front, meaning that Iran has been unsuccessful in tackling the resolve of both the Israeli government, the Israeli military chain of command, and Israel society as a whole. And that's very, very important, because resolve is such an important factor within wars such as this. And it's one of the main vulnerabilities in Western security posture as of this particular moment in time. I will also delve into that a little bit later on in the strategic breakdown, which will be uploaded later on this week. So they're opening up another front against Hezbollah because they want to mitigate the threat that Hezbollah poses to them. Hezbollah is one of the main spear points that Iran utilizes to project its influence throughout the region, to destabilize it, and to keep its proxy network intact. Hezbollah has a very long reach, as I previously explained on this channel, ranging from across the Middle East to Northern Africa and even to Latin America, where they've helped train some of the cartels as well as some of the government forces of dictatorships within that continent. So Hezbollah's arm is indeed very long. They currently have between 11,000 and 13,000 rockets and missiles and projectiles at their disposal, which makes them significantly better armed than the vast majority of the armed forces, the conventional armed forces that are out there. So yes, Hezbollah poses a significant threat, not just to Israel, but to the entire region, and it should be neutralized. It should have been neutralized decades ago, but hey, that's a story for another day. Bottom line is, what it shows us is that Israel's economy is holding up, Israel's military resources are holding up, and most importantly, Israel's resolve is holding up. Now, pertaining to the Lebanese theater, what Israel is currently trying to do is gain control of as much territory within southern Lebanon as possible, particularly the area south of the Litani River. Why is that area so important? Because it's Hezbollah's spiritual home, right? Ever since the 1980s, the bulk of Hezbollah operations and strongholds were located in the proximities of southern Lebanon, south of the Litani River, and according to every UN resolution and agreement that has been tried to be implemented between Lebanon, between Hezbollah and between Israel, focused on Hezbollah's retreat from the south of Lebanon to north of the Litani River. So now Israel is enforcing that notion with military force. So what they're currently doing is they're demolishing the bridges, the most important bridgeheads leading from the north across the Litani River to the south, which Hezbollah has utilized for decades to support and reinforce their troops on the ground. Now, once that is taken away, Hezbollah loses control of the vast amount of its strongholds, the vast amount of its networks, smuggling routes, but also financial networks, banking systems, financial institutions, networks and mediators that are currently residing within the south of Lebanon will become obsolete. As of this particular moment in time, Qiyam, which is a city in south of Lebanon, which has long been one of Hezbollah's main vantage points pertaining to their attacks in Israeli soil, because it's located on a very high ground, which allows Hezbollah a view of Israeli troops, movements, forces, and it helps them to easier target and locate Israeli targets within the north of the Jewish state. So Israel is currently trying to take control over Qiyam, to take away Hezbollah's most important vantage point within the south, making operations that they launch against northern Israel significantly more challenging. So Israel has a very sound plan when it comes to the Lebanese theater. I would say their plan for the Lebanese theater is significantly more solid than their plan for the Iranian theater, at the very least based on what we have seen thus far. Now, as I've said before, as of this particular moment in time, the Strait of Hormuz will be the most heavily contested arena within the Iranian theater, and for a good reason. The Strait of Hormuz must be reopened, and to a certain extent what the combined strike force is currently doing is exactly what you want to be doing. Keep degrading the offensive and defensive maritime and naval capabilities of your adversaries. However, on the short term, it might not be enough, especially since it's unlikely that the Ayatollah regime will topple anytime soon. Now, I've previously done another strategy breakdown on this channel where I've shown just how we can effectively reopen the Strait of Hormuz with drastic and aggressive measures on the short term. So please feel free to check that video out after this one. So, in my opinion, we will currently see, for the foreseeable future, these tit-for-tat exchanges. I believe they're going to last for quite some time, especially for as long as more decisive force is being reserved or being kept at bay. We know that amphibious assault groups are moving towards the Middle East, so we know that there are contingency options for the United States in place should they wish to escalate the conflict further. But as of this particular moment in time, Iran will utilize every tool that it has at its disposal, even if it's only to keep their narrative of resistance standing and to show the world that they're still in this fight. Resolve, resolve, resolve. And resolve is what the West needs, particularly the United States, if they truly want to bring an end to the threat that the Ayatollah regime poses, not just to the region, but to global stability and economic stability in general. That's a topic for another strategy breakdown that, like I said before, will be uploaded on this channel somewhere later on this week. This is all that I want to share with you today. I thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this clip. If you have any questions for me, any comments for me, any subject that you wish to see me discuss next, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below, or reach out to me to one of my socials, and I aim to get back at you as soon as possible. Once again, thank you very much, and hope to see you all again on the next video. Bye bye.